Maple was not like any ordinary house cat. Even as a kitten, she had shown a spirit of adventure that made the rest of the world seem small and full of possibilities. She was a small ginger tabby with bright green eyes that sparkled with curiosity and mischief. Maple lived in a cozy cottage at the edge of a lush forest, cared for by a gentle family. Every morning, she stretched on the sunlit windowsill and watched golden light dance on the leaves of the old oak tree outside. The world felt safe and warm, and Maple felt lucky to have such a peaceful, loving home. For many weeks and months, Maple's days followed a happy, peaceful rhythm. Each sunrise found her waiting beside her favorite window for Mrs. Thompson to pour her a bowl of warm milk and set out a dish of flaky tuna on the porch. Maple would purr gratefully as she ate, savoring the gentle breeze that ruffled her fur. In the cozy kitchen, she would stretch and rub up against Mrs. Thompson's legs, soaking up the love and quiet hum of the morning. By mid-morning, after a bit of playful yarn chases and batting at stray sunbeams on the wooden floor, Maple often settled on a soft cushion by the wood-burning stove. There she would take a long nap, feeling the warmth of the fire on her back and dreaming sweet dreams of dancing butterflies. When afternoon came, Maple perched on the garden bench or wandered among the flower beds. She loved watching the garden birds hop about, the butterflies flitting among flowers, and the squirrels scampering up trees. Sometimes a ladybug would crawl onto her nose and make her sneeze, which made Mrs. Thompson laugh. In those golden hours, the whole garden felt magical and peaceful. Maple's world was so gentle and predictable that she could hardly imagine anything ever changing. One crisp autumn morning, something magical happened that Maple would remember forever. The air smelled of wood smoke and fallen leaves, and a gentle breeze tickled her whiskers. Mrs. Thompson was humming softly in the kitchen as she poured coffee and set a plate of honey toast on the table. Maple sat on the warm wooden floor, tail curled around her paws, waiting for her morning pat. Everything felt ordinary, except Maple herself felt restless. A strange flutter in her heart told Maple that today would be different. Maple stepped away from the window for a moment to drink from her bowl of milk, sipping contentedly. Then, as she padded back to her favorite sunbeam spot on the windowsill, a tiny brown butterfly drifted past the open door. Its wings were flecked with gold and amber, dancing through the air on the soft breeze. Maple's eyes widened with wonder and delight. The butterfly was so delicate and free. A spark of curiosity lit up in her green eyes. Maple felt the old happy instinct. It was time for adventure. Without a second thought, she leaped from the windowsill and dashed out the door after the butterfly. Her paws patted softly on the lawn as she bounded across the garden, chasing her graceful new friend. At first, Maple raced through the flower beds with pure joy. She brushed past rose bushes and daisies, sending clouds of petals into the air. She leapt after the butterfly as it floated above the vegetables in the garden. Maple forgot everything else: the crunch of the gravel underfoot, the distant call of a morning crow. She was only focused on the brilliant wings ahead of her. The butterfly fluttered higher, teasing Maple, leading her out through the old wooden arch at the far end of the garden. The last thing Maple heard was Mrs. Thompson's soft chuckle and a faint, "Maple, be careful," as the gate quietly closed behind her. Maple found herself deep in the sunlit woods beyond the cottage. Tall trees arched overhead, their leaves glowing gold and crimson. Shafts of light danced on the mossy ground as she trotted forward. For a few moments, everything felt like a wonderful game. Maple darted between the trunks, careful not to trip on the scattered branches. She caught the smell of pine needles and earth, exhilarating in the adventure of the open forest. Her heart pounded in excitement rather than fear, and she laughed with a happy little meow as the butterfly flitted on ahead, teasing her. But then the butterfly suddenly slipped out of sight behind a thicket. Maple skidded to a halt on a carpet of fallen oak leaves. The forest around her grew very still. The birdsong faded. Maple's heart, which had been racing with excitement, began to tremble in worry. She realized she was all alone and further from home than ever before. Maple turned slowly, trying to remember the way back, but nothing looked familiar. The gentle path through the garden had disappeared, replaced by a tangle of ferns and wildflowers. The bright cottage chimney was nowhere in sight. Instead, the old trees of the forest loomed tall around her, silent and endless. The comforting smell of toast and lavender from the kitchen had vanished. Now the air smelled strongly of pine resin and damp earth. A shiver ran through Maple as a cool breeze rustled the leaves. Her ears pricked up at every sound. For a moment, all was quiet, and Maple felt very small. She sat down under the shelter of a wide oak tree and wrapped her tail around herself, feeling suddenly afraid. A few damp leaves drifted down and landed softly on her nose. She shook them off and tried to steady her breath. Maple let out a small, plaintive meow. "Mrs. Thompson?" she called softly. "I'm here." Her voice sounded tiny in the vast quiet of the woods. There was no answer, only the distant whisper of leaves in the trees. Tears of worry started to well up in Maple's eyes. She thought of home, of the warm kitchen floor, of breakfast on the porch, of Mrs. Thompson's kind smile in the morning light. She pressed her paws together, as if trying to hold on to those memories. But now she was far from home, and it was getting hard not to feel lost and alone. Maple shook her head and took a deep breath, trying to be brave. She knew that if she panicked, she would never find her way. "I have to be brave," Maple whispered to herself. "I will find my way back." Gathering her courage, she stood up. The forest floor was soft with moss and pine cones. The sun had climbed a little, and she imagined his calm eyes and gentle voice. "Trust your nose and your heart. You belong where love is." With that thought, Maple held her head high and began to move. She decided to retrace her steps. First, she turned and walked back toward where the butterfly had led her, thinking maybe that path would eventually circle around toward home. Maple padded carefully through the ferns and wildflowers, sniffing the air. Every so often, she stopped and sniffed. Where did the air smell familiar? But the forest held only the wild scent of pine and earth in its breath. At one point, Maple came to a small stream trickling through the woods. She hopped across on a few stepping stones and drank from the cool water, letting its sweet taste calm her nerves. Maple sighed in relief as the fresh water soothed her throat. Nearby, a bright yellow dragonfly skimmed across the surface, and a shy fish broke the surface with a tiny splash. Maple blinked in wonder at their beauty and calm. Just then, a soft voice spoke from above. "Good morning to you, little wanderer." Maple's green eyes snapped open and she looked up. There, sitting on a sunlit boulder, was an old tabby cat with a kind face. His fur was grizzled with gray, and his yellow eyes were warm and gentle. He smiled down at Maple. "Who are you?" Maple meowed, stepping back a little. "Name's Silas," purred the old cat. "I've prowled these woods longer than I can remember. You look far from home, young one." He didn't sound surprised at all to see Maple there, almost as if he had been waiting for her. Maple nodded shyly. "I chased the butterfly and now I can't find my way back," she admitted, ears flattening a bit. "I'm scared." Silas jumped down from the rock and padded over with a soft rumble of a purr. "Ah, it can be frightening at first. But don't worry, you've met a friend now. I'll help you find your way." Maple's whiskers twitched with relief. The old cat's calm presence made her feel suddenly less alone. She stepped closer. Silas settled on a rock. "Come sit with me a moment," he invited. Maple sat on a low stone by him. They watched the sunlight flicker in the trees for a minute. "You must trust your instincts, Maple," Silas said kindly. "The forest is full of friends. If you know how to listen, breathe deeply, the air around you carries many scents. Your home's smell might be carried by the breeze if you find the right direction." Maple sniffed again. At first, all she caught was pine and moss, but Silas pointed his great tabby head to the south. Maple did as he said and took another deep breath. This time, on the gentlest of breezes, she detected something: the faint aroma of lavender and warm bread. Her heart leaped. "Home," she whispered. "I smell home." Silas nodded his head. "Well done, little one," he purred proudly. "That's your home scent. Mrs. Thompson's lavender sachets and her fresh bread. You're back on the right track, but it's best to learn a bit more before you set off." Over the next while, Silas taught Maple some tricks of the woods. He had her close her eyes and listen to the forest songs. A blue jay shout told them that spring was coming, and an owl's soft hoot guided them toward north at night. Silas even showed Maple how to follow the sun. He said that when the sun is near midday, it tells you east from west. Maple learned to look at shadows to know which way to walk. They strolled through golden meadows under gentle autumn skies. Silas pointed out landmarks: a tree stump carved like an owl by old Mr. Williams, a hollow log that housed a family of raccoons, and a field of purple asters near a stone fence. With each step, Maple felt her fear melting away, replaced by curiosity and confidence. Silas shared stories too, as they walked side by side. He told Maple of winters past, of snowy nights and cozy barns. He said he remembered being a lost kitten and how a kind old human lady, the very Mrs. Thompson, took him in by a warm fire. Maple realized the same lady who raised her had also given Silas a home once upon a time. She liked that thought, and it made the forest seem friendlier. Slowly, Silas led Maple uphill through the woods. When they reached the top, Silas hopped up on a boulder and looked around with Maple. There, spread out below, in the soft afternoon light, was the wide view. Maple's breath caught. In the distance across rolling fields, she could see the wisp of smoke rising from a little stone chimney. The chimney of her own cottage. Maple's heart swelled with joy. "I see it! That's home!" she cried softly, her tail whisking excitedly. "Indeed," purred Silas with a smile. "You've done well. Now remember the way. The river bends near the oak tree. Follow that path toward the fence lined with yellow flowers. That will lead you straight home." Maple hopped off the rock and danced down the hill, her paws carried by excitement. She thanked Silas with a loud purr. "Goodbye, Silas. Thank you," she meowed as she bounded away. Silas watched Maple run down toward the village in the distance. With a gentle wave of his tail, he disappeared quietly back into the shadows of the woods. Maple turned briefly and called, "I'll see you again someday." The old cat's soft voice floated back to her on the breeze. "Be brave, little one." Maple's adventures were not over yet, but her courage had been found. With Silas's guidance fresh in her mind, Maple marched forward along the path toward home. The late afternoon sun grew warmer on her back, and the wind carried the scent of orchard apples and last summer's herbs. Through fields of tall golden wheat she trotted confidently, the dry stalks brushing warmly against her sides. The fields gave way to a small pasture as Maple neared a village. In the pasture, a herd of sleepy cows chewed their cud. One curious cow lifted its head and looked at Maple with gentle eyes. Maple purred and rubbed her head against the cow's large leg. The cow mooed softly, seeming to say, "Safe journey," before dropping back to its grasses. Maple smiled. Even the animals were kind to her. A farm dog stretched on the porch of the farmhouse next door. When the dog saw Maple, its tail began to wag. Maple padded over, and the big friendly dog sniffed her once and gave an encouraging bark. He seemed to say, "Almost there." Maple nuzzled the dog gratefully and continued on, happier than ever. By the time Maple saw the red roof of her cottage up ahead, her heart was full. She remembered the way past the old willow tree and over the stone gate. Just as she was racing toward the gate, heavy clouds suddenly rolled across the sky. The warm sun was chased away, and a cold wind whipped across the road. Maple's fur stood on end as raindrops began to spatter. "No," she cried softly. The sky opened, unleashing a sudden storm. Rain lashed down, and brilliant forks of lightning split the sky with thunderous quaps. Maple was so close to home, but now danger loomed. She darted off the road just in time and spotted a big old red barn beside the lane. It was closed tight, but Maple squeezed through the crack under the door. She was soaked and shaking from the wind and rain as she ran in. Inside the barn was a welcome refuge. Maple shook the raindrops from her fur and settled in a corner of the warm straw. The barn smelled sweet of hay and warmth. Above her, a barn owl blinked sleepily from its perch on a beam. A gentle brown mare nickered softly from a stall, and a rooster murmured in his coop. The steady breathing of the horse and the soft clucks of the chickens made Maple feel safe for the first time since the storm began. Maple curled up in the golden straw by the horse's stall, the horse's warm muzzle near her. The storm continued outside, but Maple felt comforted. She began to drift toward sleep, her own purr a gentle lullaby in the quiet barn. Just then, a faint cry echoed through the barn door. Maple's ears shot up. Outside, huddled under a bush, was a small gray kitten, teeth chattering. Maple felt a surge of compassion. She uncurled and rushed outside in the pouring rain. Lightning flashed and thunder roared overhead, but Maple's courage did not waver. She carefully nuzzled and gently licked at the thorns trapping the kitten, biting them loose one by one with her teeth. Finally, the kitten was free. "Oh, thank you," the tiny kitten mewed, trembling and wet. Her fur was silver gray like moonlight, and her bright eyes were wide with fright and gratitude. Maple gave the kitten a gentle lick on the head. "I'm Maple," she said softly. "You're safe now." The kitten snuggled into Maple's side. "I'm Silver," she whispered. "I got lost in the storm. My home is somewhere beyond the trees." Maple nodded. "You have me now," she purred. "I'll help you find your way, Silver." Together they crept back inside. Maple nuzzled Silver against her warm belly, shielding the little kitten from the cold storm. Maple knew she was not alone anymore. She had a friend to take care of, and that gave her strength. Silver purred and fell asleep in Maple's soft fur, feeling safe and loved. Maple stayed up a little longer, listening to the rain patter on the roof. When the storm finally subsided and dawnlight crept through the cracks, Maple emerged. Silver was awake now, giving Maple a grateful little mew. The night sky had cleared, and a rainbow arced above the barn. Maple led Silver outside. The morning air was fresh and cool under a bright sky. Together, they stepped out into the lane. Not far off, a kindly old farmer, the same gentle man from the fields, saw them. He had just put on his boots and was carrying a basket of warm oatmeal. When he spotted Maple and Silver, he hurried over with a smile. "Well, I'll be," the farmer said in a gravelly yet friendly voice. He knelt down and carefully lifted the sleepy pair, who were still shivering slightly. Maple meowed softly and nuzzled the farmer's hand, rubbed her head against Maple's side. The farmer chuckled. "Two little travelers, huh? Don't you worry," he said. "I'll get you warmed up." He offered Maple a crisp apple slice, which Maple sniffed before nibbling gratefully. The farmer then poured a bowl of warm milk for each of the cats. Maple lapped it up greedily, and Silver mewed in delight. Warmed by the farmer's gentle care, Maple felt a deep gratitude in her heart. The old man stroked Maple's fur gently and promised, "I'll help you get where you need to go." They found a soft blanket on the porch where Maple and Silver curled up together, purring. Maple purred with contentment, not just from the milk and comfort, but because she knew kindness was on her side at last. By midday, the sun was shining again. The farmer wrapped the two little cats in his basket with a wool blanket. "All right," he said, "let's get you both home." He walked them back along the familiar road. Maple and Silver snuggled close in the basket. Maple kept one eye on the passing fields and cottages, feeling her heart flutter with each step closer to home. Soon, she recognized the mossy garden wall that led to her own gate. Just as Silver hopped out to dart across a yard to her family's waiting arms, the farmer gently set down Maple's basket. "Here you are, Miss Maple," he said. Maple leaped from the basket and ran up to the garden gate. It opened easily at her scratch. "Maple!" A joyful cry came from behind. There was Mrs. Thompson on the porch, holding a little tray of cream and oatmeal. Her face was flushed with worry and relief. In the doorway was Mr. Harris, the kind gardener, smiling warmly as he saw Maple. Maple bounded through the garden, ears twitching with excitement. She leaped into Mrs. Thompson's arms, meowing happily. The woman dropped the tray and wrapped Maple in a tight hug. "Oh, you silly girl, I was so worried," Mrs. Thompson whispered, her eyes shining with tears. Maple nuzzled Mrs. Thompson's cheek. The old cardigan she was wearing smelled of lavender and the breakfast Mrs. Thompson had planned. Maple knew she was finally home. Mr. Harris came over and scratched Maple under the chin, saying, "Welcome back, little adventurer." Inside the cozy cottage, Maple settled by the warm fireplace. The crackling flames danced on the walls. Mrs. Thompson dried Maple's fur with a towel and held a bowl of cream out for her. Maple lapped it up gratefully. Everything around Maple felt familiar and comforting. The ticking clock, the soft quilt on the couch, the smell of stew simmering on the stove. Maple gazed up at Mrs. Thompson and then at Mr. Harris. Both were smiling down at her, relieved and loving. Maple purred, nuzzling against their legs. As the evening grew quiet, Maple found a soft blanket to curl up on beside the hearth. She thought about everything that had happened. The wise Silas, who taught her to trust herself. The little kitten Silver, who became her friend. And the kind farmer, who showed her people's hearts were warm even to a drenched stray cat. Mrs. Thompson later told Maple that she had tracked down Silver's family that very morning. Silver was safe, playing in a sunlit garden with her brothers and sisters, just as Maple had thought. Maple purred happily at the thought of her friend being found and loved too. Maple realized she had learned something wonderful on this journey. courage, trust, and kindness. Courage to face the dark woods and the storm, trust in the help of friends like Silas and the farmer, and kindness to help Silver even when she was cold and scared. These lessons would stay in her heart forever. Outside, the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, and the gentle sound of crickets sang from the garden. Inside the cottage, peace and warmth wrapped around Maple like a soft blanket. Maple felt grateful and content. She had traveled far, but love and friendship had guided her every step. As Maple drifted off to sleep, Mrs. Thompson's gentle voice murmured in the next room, "We'll keep you safe and warm, Maple." Maple purred softly, her eyes closing. In the quiet glow of the hearth, Maple knew that home was not just a place, but all the love that awaited her. And with that happy, heartwarming thought in her mind, Maple fell into a long, dream-filled sleep, exactly where she belonged, surrounded by those who loved her more than anything.